just to say a little bit about mindfulness in this particular time. Um, in some sense, this kind of situation that we're in at the moment um, is just what mindfulness training teaches us for, or helps us to prepare for. John Kabat-Zinn talks about, the training of mindfulness as weaving the parachute before you get flung out of the plane, so that you're ready. And in many ways, we've been flung out of our planes over the last few months. And many of the skills that are trained on a mindfulness retreat day, like today, or on a mindfulness course, are precisely those that have been called on and called for in this time of lockdown. So the requirement to stop, to let go of much of our doing, to perhaps come back from our desires to make the present moment different from what it is, whether that's planning what's going to come next, or fears about what might happen to us or to loved ones or to the wider world. It's also required a recognition of our interconnectedness. So, seeing very clearly how our own behaviors affect others, and the need to recognize that interconnectivity in one sense, in a kind of a difficult way, in the sense that we can be the spreaders of this virus, and that can affect some people very, very severely. And also in the recognition that being human, we are actually open to expanding our field of care beyond perhaps where it usually is, perhaps centered in our our own kind of small circle of family and friends. This is kind of really borne out by the appreciation for those people who are working on the front line of this, and our willingness to retreat ourselves in the midst of this, and let go sometimes of a whole range of securities that we might usually rely on. So in many senses, this is already like a retreat, at least for those of us who are perhaps not on the front line. Maybe, of course, it's not the same for everyone. People are in very, very different situations. But for most people, we have been invited to step back and stop doing. And that brings with it a certain intensity. Mindfulness training teaches us how to work with the intensity of dropping back into non-doing. It's almost like the doing mind treats its own demise as a threat. Kind of like, oh no, I can't possibly. And, what might happen if I don't? And of course, all sorts of emotions can come up in the midst of this retreating, which we train for in mindfulness training on a retreat day. So it's okay that happens. It's kind of like, it's not like we have to become, have to somehow judge our practice by what has come up for us in this time, whether that's great anxiety or, planning mind, or frustration or sadness or guilt. All of that is part of the curriculum that arises for us and that we're here to work with. And actually, it's the relationship that we bring to each present moment experience as it comes that is the mark of mindfulness, rather than whether we're stressed out, or whether we're guilty because actually we're having a good time during this period. There's all sorts of possible different reactions that can come up that we're not in control of. You know, just as there's so much externally that we're not in control of. But what we do have agency over with practice is how we connect with this situation. And also in the ability perhaps to rest in stillness and in not knowing, and actually this discovery that when we stop doing that there are benefits that come. Perhaps the realization of the interconnectivity of the world, perhaps the the sort of unintended benefits to the environment of letting go of much of the activity of the world, even just for a short time. Maybe that when we stop doing, we actually start to feel not just the difficulties that are present, but are able to appreciate some of the little joys that are always here, but which maybe we don't usually have the inclination to appreciate. And in mindfulness training, the sort of principal approach is that we sacrifice our short-term control, or intended control, because it's not real control, but our intended control over our attempts to control our inner experience and our outer experience. And in that acceptance of whatever comes up, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, we actually discover that there's a longer term benefit to our well-being, which is completely contrary to what the doing mode of mind tells us, which is that we've got to fix something or avoid something or make more stuff happen. Of course, that's true in some circumstances, again, recognizing that there are those people who are perhaps helping people who are very ill. The doing mode is very, very, very much needed, of avoiding, i.e., protecting and doing things to help. So the doing mode has its appropriateness in certain circumstances, but as we know, in other circumstances, it becomes a hindrance rather than a help. So what we train for in mindfulness is being able to move between these two modes. And we're pretty good at the doing mode on the whole. So actually we spend a lot of time dropping into the being mode of our senses, of being willing to not know what's going to come next, of being willing to treat ourselves with kindness, whatever is coming up in the moment, and to trust that we have the qualities within us to manage this moment. In fact, we're already managing this moment by being here. Okay, so that's all I'd like to say is